we're going to try and fit a aux beam 6-gang switch panel. This switch panel can take only 6 devices. That's what 6-gang means. So it's 6 channels basically. I didn't do an unbox video, so sorry about that. Because I've been doing some validation and fitting and all that kind of stuff. So I purchased this off Amazon. It's an aux beam 6-gang or 6-channel switch panel. And what the switch panel does inside of the box, what you get, let me go there first. In the box, you get the switch panel itself. You get the control unit with stickers that you stick on top of the control unit for what you want each channel to do. You then get the switch cable. This cable you've got to run from the inside of your vehicle where your panel is to the switch panel itself. And then you get a rubber cover for this panel. So if you've got an open Jeep or something like that with no top and it rains, they request that you put this rubber panel, rubber cover over this panel. So that's pretty neat. And then what you also get is an easy fit fuse splice, if I can call it that, with the unit. So what this does is you actually take your radio fuse out of your fuse box in the engine and you replace it with this fuse splice. And inside of this fuse splice, there's a space underneath that to install your 20 amp fuse that you've removed from the radio. So now your radio is fused, but also the output going to this switch panel is fused as well. So this prevents for you to, you don't need to splice or find the ACC cable or the accessory cable inside of your vehicle. So they do recommend in the wiring diagram that the switch panel is wired to ACC, which means that it'll trigger or activate when you switch the ignition to accessories only. You can wire this unit. It's the red wire on the switch panel. You can wire this unit with directly connected to the battery. So you don't have to do ACC, but they do warn that it could drain the battery. So I'm not too sure what that will mean. I've never had one of these. Maybe there's a drain or something that runs off the unit. So ACC will guarantee that the unit shuts down 100%. And then you've got your negative wire. This just helps with the for the unit itself to get power, the switch panel. And then you've got your battery lead as well. So each one of the 6 channels inside of the switch panel unit is running inside of this cable here, the positive end of the switch panel. So, or the positive end of each channel, let me put it to you that way. If you've ever wired spotlights before, and I've done that a couple of times, I've got my old demo here. This is the old wiring harness of my old spotlights. So inside of this, we've got a relay. This is a 5-pin relay, I think it is. What a 5-pin relay does is you've got one that goes to the battery, one that goes to each spotlight. You've got one that goes to ground, which is negative, and then you've got one that goes to trigger. So your trigger would be something like a switch in order to engage the relay to switch your lights on. So this means that your spotlights feed directly from the battery instead of it trying to feed from a very weak low or wire capacity. And that is to prevent a fire, to be precise. And then also what normal switch installations have, and this is conventional if I can put it to you that way, is a fuse, inline fuse. And in this case, I had a 25 amp fuse, which is a little bit high for the spotlights I had on here, but it's a 25 amp fuse connected to the relay. So the fuse runs in between the battery and the relay system. So what makes the switch panel so cool? And then I'll tell you what's not cool about it. So when you pop the switch panel open, if you've never seen other videos before for the S-Pods and things like that, this is exactly the same as an S-Pod, just not as expensive as an S-Pod. Each one of the channels that you select on the switch panel unit itself has got its own relay on the channel. Each relay in this switch panel is rated to 30 amps. The whole unit at a one single draw can do 60 amps only. So you cannot switch all of these relays on at the same time. So if you've got a 30 amp draw off each channel, you're going to have a problem. Let me put it to you that way. So right now we do have what they've done by default is channel 1, which is in the bottom. You've got then your fuses per channel here as well. So each one of these channels are fused too, which is very, very nice. And then what happens is your positive end of your spotlight or your rock light or your hood light, the positive end goes in here. And then your spotlight itself, its negative ground, is connected to the vehicle. Now Toyota in particular, which I'm going to install here in a 2100 series, Toyota grounds their negative onto the chassis. So if you have a spotlight close to your bumper, just find the nearest grounding point and you'll ground it to negative there. I personally like to run the spotlights clean to the battery if I can on a negative piece, but it's not necessary. What's most important is the positive. It'll be fine to do it that way. So you have 6 channels, 6 relays, and 6 fuses. Channel 1 is 30 amp, channel 2 and 3 is 20 amp, channel 4 and 5 is 10 amps, and channel 6 is a 5 amp. So very low on channel 6. You can upgrade the fuses. You can make all of these 30 amp if you really wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend that. So it helps you to connect lower amperage devices to the switch panel. So that's why I'm doing this. It's instead of running a cable from the spotlights to the dashboard and doing a switch built into the dash for each one of the lights, which means I've got to run a cable for each one of the lights to run to connect them up, or do a switch at least. The trigger needs to sit inside of the dashboard. I am doing a switch panel and I never have to pull a cable into the cab again. That's the beauty of doing these S-Pod kind of systems is if you've got a rock light that you want to install later, you just wire it straight into the switch panel that sits under the hood by default. So you never have to go into your dashboard again. It's already permanently mounted. So it helps a lot with that. And then the negative piece that I was going to mention earlier is you've got to find a place to mount this, and you've got to find a place to pull this cable through the firewall. Now you'll see this cable is pretty thick. And if you ever pulled cables through on a Toyota through its firewall, they don't plan for that a lot, so there's no designated hole. Some vehicles you might have a little plug that you can rip out and you can push cables through there. In most cases, you've got to follow where they've already gone and push cables through the firewall. So getting something like this through, as thick as what it is going to be a challenge. So we're going to try and do that today to see where we can route the cable through. And then finding a spot for this monster, as small as what it looks, you'll see it, how it fits in my hand, the size of that. as small as what it looks, it's not easy to find a spot that is available to securely mount this where it won't rattle around. It's got a little bit of weight to it. It's not really heavy, so it's not too bad. And then inside of the box, you get extra fuses. That's quite nice. And then the mounting hardware for the switch panel itself, or the switch head unit. So that's that. Let's see what we're going to do with this installation.